everyone, I'm Dr. Beth Barilla, the Women's Studies Director and a professor in the Ethnic and Women's Studies Department at St. Cloud State University. I'm recording this because I have a lot of students who, towards the end of their undergraduate degree, decide they want to go to graduate school. And applying for graduate school is a complex process that can be best served with a little bit of guidance in how to do that. So this webinar will be a series of tips for successfully researching, choosing, and applying to graduate school. This is obviously not a comprehensive guidance. There are many resources out there that can also help you, but hopefully this will give you some starting places to begin the process, which can be somewhat tedious and complex, but can also, when done well, result in really inspiring and successful choices of graduate school for you. So if you want more of this type of support, consider studying women's studies. Here at St. Cloud State, women's studies can be pursued in many different ways. You can take our Intro to Women's Studies class, which fulfills Goal 5 and is a diversity requirement. You can take women's studies electives. We have a lot of upper division electives that might be relevant for people in various programs. And you can also minor in women's studies or major in women's studies. So if you're interested in any of these at St. Cloud State, contact Dr. Beth Barilla. And if you are watching this from a different university, look into women's and gender studies at your university. So as you think about going to graduate school, here are some things to think about. First of all, you might want to consider what program do you want to study. Sometimes it's going to mean continuing more advanced studies in whatever undergraduate major you have. Other times it's going to mean taking a different direction or specializing in an area that maybe you touched on in undergraduate but you want to go deeper in, or maybe it means choosing a completely different path entirely. So think both about your interests and various career options that might be available to you in different fields. It would also be a good idea to consider, is this a good time for you to pursue graduate studies? Graduate school is not easy. It requires a intense commitment of time, energy, resources, and focus. And whether you're going for a master's or a PhD or some other area of study, it requires that you devote yourself to it. And so you really need to think about, are you ready for it? Having worked with a lot of students over the years, some students choose graduate school right out of undergraduate study because they've known all along they want to do it, because now's a good time. For some of them, they don't have family commitments or house payments or other kinds of things, and so now is a good time to focus on grad school or to relocate. Some of those students know that if they leave school now, they will have a much harder time returning to it, and so a continued study, one right after the other, is good for them. Other students decide that for them, it's better to have a break in school. It's better to go work in the job force for a little while, get some job experience, maybe even some natural maturity that comes with that, and then return to school with a little bit of job experience under your belt so that you can really absorb more of the education and have a better context through which to apply it. Really, this is a decision that you need to make for yourself. Then think about, are you looking for a master's degree, a PhD, or both? In some fields, master's degrees are considered terminal degrees, meaning they are really all you need to really specialize in your field. Other fields, a master's degree is a stepping stone to a PhD, and different programs have both freestanding masters. Some have a master's that's en route to a PhD, and some have only a PhD. So you'll want to think about, what you want to study and what makes sense for you in your chosen field, and also in your area of interest with a particular career path. There are some jobs that require a master's to be able to do certain things. There are other jobs that really require a PhD. So knowing that about the career path that you want to go into is a good thing. You can, one way to find that out is, of course, internet research and looking at job postings for the kinds of jobs you want. All job postings will have a list of the requirements they expect from their candidates, and so that will give you a sense of what kinds of advanced degrees you might need. It's also a good idea to talk to people who are doing the kinds of jobs you want, or who are familiar with the fields that you want to go into and the kinds of professional expectations and career paths in those fields. So do a little advanced research so that you know what you're getting into. A master's degree typically takes around 2 to 3 years if you're going full-time, and a PhD can take anywhere from 5 to however long it takes. I think I took maybe, I can't remember, 8, maybe 9 years to do mine. It could have been done in probably 5, but it took me longer. And so, again, think about the kinds of time commitment you have and whether you're going to be going full-time or whether you're also going to be balancing family, other jobs, a full-time paying job with graduate school on top of that. All of that will impact the kind of time it will take to finish your degree. I should also say that in this webinar, I'm not really going to be talking about law school or med school for that matter, because I don't know very much about it. I encourage you, if those are the paths you want to pursue, to search out people who are experts in those fields to give you some guidance on that. Now, I'm coming from a women's studies program, a women's and gender studies field, and so the students in my programs are really often looking at either graduate school in feminist studies or a combination of feminist studies and other fields. We've had students go on to master's degrees in psychology, in gerontology, in social work, in MFA programs. We've had people go into specifically feminist studies programs or feminist and anthropology. So you can do, these days, you can do master's and PhDs in feminist studies. That was not available when I was doing graduate school. You can also go into graduate programs with in a particular field, such as anthropology or sociology or English, with a partnership in women's studies or feminist studies. And so if you're interested in that kind of a partnership, then as you research graduate schools, you should really look at how they talk about their programs, and is it possible to do an interdisciplinary graduate degree like that. In other words, if you're going to a graduate school, let's say in anthropology or sociology, do they specifically let you partner with feminist studies or women's studies? Is that integrated into the graduate program? Or is that something that you're going to have to fight all along the way to do? And if it's the second answer, then maybe that's not the program for you. Or maybe you want to get a master's in anthropology with a focus in feminist studies, and there are people in that faculty, in that anthropology program that have a focus on feminism, right? So you can do what you want to do within the confines of that program. So these are just some things to think about. As you're researching graduate studies and particular programs, you might think about, do they offer a certificate? Some departments, let's say a sociology department or a psychology department, they might have you get your master's degree in psychology or in English, but they might offer a certificate in feminist studies, for instance. Some might offer joint graduate degrees, where when you graduate, you'll get a joint degree in women's studies and psychology, for instance. Or some might offer interdisciplinary degrees, where you can really do a kind of intentionally wide-reaching interdisciplinary program. They're going to talk about all of that on their websites, so you should really do some in-depth research on the different programs until you find one that really reflects what you want to do. If you want to do an interdisciplinary degree, you might really think about how much does the school structurally support interdisciplinary programs. That is, how much does it let you do interdisciplinary work? So when I got my PhD, and that was many years ago, so fields have changed a little since then, I was allowed to take, and in fact I think required to take, one class outside of my program. So I was getting my doctorate in English. At the time there were no feminist studies PhDs, and I was both required and allowed to take one graduate class outside of my English department. If I really wanted an interdisciplinary degree, I probably would have wanted more than one class outside of that program. And in fact, quite honestly, I did want more than one class, so I audited classes, meaning I took classes without credit because I wanted to be in them outside of class. These days, graduate programs have changed quite a bit, so there are programs that let you do interdisciplinary work. I should say here that to really apply for graduate schools with intentionality and thoughtfulness, and to really pick the programs that are really good for you and develop a strong application, which by the way takes a lot of work, I suggest that you start researching graduate schools at least a year before you apply. Certainly 6 months before you apply. And I think you should also talk to people. Talk to the professors in your fields. Talk to fellow students. Talk to other graduate students. If you know of any graduate students in the kinds of fields you want to go into, or maybe even in other fields, get their advice. Talk to them about their experience so that you can really learn from it. Think carefully about whether you're ready for graduate school. It takes time and effort and money to apply for graduate school. It's not something you should do overnight. And it takes a lot of commitment to successfully complete graduate school. So think about your life circumstances and whether this is the right time for you. Think about the career options and actual jobs for graduates in different fields. Be intentional about it. You don't want to go through an entire graduate degree, commit all that time, energy, and money, and then find out there are no jobs in it, right? So think intentionally about that, and this is where you can really talk to your professors in the fields, talk to the people who are doing the types of jobs you want to do, and find out what kind of backgrounds they're really required to have in order to do those jobs. Do your research well in advance, as I just said, at least 6 months, ideally a year beforehand, so that you can really lay the groundwork and make sure your applications are as strong and solid as you can get them, and also that you're targeting schools that are really good fits for you. Ask your classmates who are applying to grad schools and build a community of support to really help you apply. Right? You can learn from each other, you can share resources, you can commiserate, you can look at each other's applications so that you can really support each other as you do this. And then really look at the resources that are available at your university. All undergraduate universities have a lot of resources for their students. Here at St. Cloud State, we have the Right Place, which could help you edit and review your writing sample for grad schools, and your personal statement, which are things I'll talk about in the next installment of this webinar. We also have a graduate school at St. Cloud State that has a lot of resources, both not only for actual students, but for prospective students. And so you could use some of those resources to help you think about how to make your application most successful and how to learn about graduate school. And then research existing programs. And as you research programs that might be good fits for you, here are some things to consider. Consider whether you're willing and able to relocate. Some people, this is especially if they're going right out of undergraduate, now is a decent time to think about relocating. So I've had a lot of students who have researched schools all over the United States and even internationally, and found programs that really fit them. We've had students relocate to Arizona, to California, to out east, because at this moment in their lives, they were kind of untethered. They were a little more mobile than they were expecting they might be later in life, and they wanted to choose a program that was appropriate for them without being bound to geographical restrictions. Other people are tied to an area because of family responsibilities, because they want to stay near their family, because they really like the area, because they don't have money to relocate, because they like local programs. And so that will, that decision is really about your circumstances. And so you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. If you decide to relocate, it is sometimes helpful to narrow down a list of schools that are like your top choices. And then if it is financially feasible for you, go look at those schools, go visit them, talk to the people there, see if it feels like a good fit, see if you're happy in those cities and in those areas. Now that costs money and it takes time, so it may not be appropriate or possible for you. If it is though, it can be really helpful because you're committing anywhere from 2 to 5, 6 years, maybe even 10, depending on the length of your program. You're committing that amount of your life to being in a particular place. And so if place matters to you, if it's really important that you feel comfortable and at home in a particular location, then it might be a good idea to go there and check it out and make sure you want to spend that time of your life there. Also, for some people, once they relocate, even if they had intended to move after that, sometimes life happens and you end up living there, right? You get tied. Maybe you find a partner. Maybe you start a family. And then when you finish your program, it doesn't really make sense to relocate again. And so you might want to think about, are you going to be happy in that area? Does it have a diverse enough community? Does it have job options? Are you happy with the geography? Are you happy being that far from family? Those kinds of things are things worth looking at. And then before you start really looking at grad schools, also think carefully about what you're looking for in a program, right? Not only your areas of specialty, like so this means looking at, are you looking to pursue a master's or a PhD in a particular discipline? But then also, are there areas within that discipline that you really want to focus on? Are there things you're really looking for in a program? Are there areas of involvement that you want that program to foster? Are there, do you really want them to be involved in the community? For instance, do you really want a part of your graduate program to be connected to community involvement or something like that? Knowing that in advance can really help you find programs that fit you and your interests. So really taking some time to sit down and journal, or to have a good lengthy conversation with a close friend about why you want to pursue graduate school and what it is you think you're looking for in a graduate school. And what questions you might have to start with. Now, you might not know some of those questions until you start actually researching programs. As you start researching, you might actually develop more questions, and that's a good thing, right? But going into the process with a sense of, here's what I know I want right now, can really help you narrow things down. And then thinking about personal reasons and needs, right? Are there personal reasons you're going for grad school or looking in a particular area? Are there needs you have or interests you have that you really want to make sure to fulfill? Just being really intentional about what it is you're looking for in a graduate program can be really helpful at this stage of the process. So this link here is one link. The Smith College has a list of feminist, women's, and gender studies graduate programs. It's a really good place to start. It is not, of course, the only or most comprehensive list out there, but it is a really good place to start. And if you're looking for programs in other fields, my guess is you could find a list of those programs as well. And your faculty advisors in those programs at your undergraduate university can also give you some suggestions. Here's one thing to think about. Sometimes different fields, different disciplines have ways of measuring prestige and worth of graduate programs. And sometimes those ways of measuring prestige and worth affect future job options. I know that this is certainly the case if you're considering to go on to teach at a university. So this may not be true of every field, and this is why it's good to talk to your faculty advisors in different fields. But if you're looking, for instance, to become a university professor, there are prestige standards, I guess you could say, about different schools and different graduate programs in different schools. And so, for instance, programs that are considered Research One universities as opposed to teaching universities, Research One universities are typically considered more prestigious. And this is something that I didn't know when I was applying for my master's degrees, but basically where you get your undergraduate, where you get your master's, typically you want your master's to be at a more prestigious school. And certainly once you get your doctorate, you want your doctorate to be at a reasonably prestigious school, because that may affect the kinds of jobs that you will be considered for when you go on the job market for a professorial degree or for a professorial job. It does matter, and whether or not it should, prestige of universities matter. Names and credibility and status, not only of the universities, but of the faculty members at those universities who will be writing you letters of recommendations for jobs. So these are some things to think about and to know before you start looking at graduate schools. So I suggest talking to your advisors and getting some advice on that as you start looking for schools. And then also consider, does the program have a standalone master's, a combination of MA and PhD, a certificate, etc.? So look at what kinds of options they have. Many programs have a standalone master's, and then, so for instance, we have some former women's studies students who went to one place to get their master's and then moved somewhere else to get their PhD. Other programs have kind of masters embedded in their PhDs, or people complete their masters and can go on at the same school to get their PhDs. These are things to consider, and the websites of any given school are going to tell you those things. Here are some things to look for when you're researching graduate schools. Read the mission statements of the programs. They all have descriptions on their websites of who they are and what they do. And pay attention to what lights a fire under you. As you read their program, does it description and their mission statement, does it sound fairly generic? Does it leave you kind of meh, kind of lukewarm? Or does it really excite you, right? You want to be excited about a graduate program, and if you read the description of something and it lights a fire under you, then that suggests that it might be a good fit for you. Look really carefully at their core courses. What do they require all graduate students in their program to take? And do those courses excite you? Do they make you want to study? Because let me tell you, graduate work is a lot of work. You should expect to read at least a book a week in every single class, write extensively, and do a ton of outside work. So you want to be excited about most of their grad programs, most of their core requirements. If you're not excited about most of them, then that's probably not going to be a good fit for you, and you're not going to be motivated to do the work. What electives, what areas of specialty or tracks are available? So every semester they're going to have not only their core required courses, but also their elective offerings. And most programs will have kind of a series of tracks or areas of specialty that the students can pursue in addition to the core required courses. So look at those and see again, are you excited about them? Are there courses regularly offered that will let you pursue the area of specialty that you want? Look also at the faculty of the graduate programs. What are their areas of expertise? And do any of them align with your own interests? This is really important, because in any graduate program, you're going to need ultimately to put together a committee of people that will let you, that will help you develop your thesis and or your doctorate. And so you're going to need to pick generally 3, maybe 4 people that you work really closely with, that help you develop your thesis or doctorate. And so you want to make sure that there are people at that program that you really want to work with, whose areas of specialty excite you, whose areas of specialty you want to learn more about, and that will help you develop that area of expertise. Now here's a caveat. Let's jump down to the very bottom of the slide. You want to go into graduate school with a sense of what you want to work on and your area of specialty. And that knowledge of what you want to do will both help you pick a school, but also help you convince them to pick you. Because graduate work is always about a fit. Being accepted to graduate programs is always about a fit between the student's interest and the focus of the program. And so you want a sense of where you want to go in graduate school, what kinds of things you want to focus on and study. But you also don't want to limit yourself before you even get there. As you learn more, you're going to find new directions that you didn't even know about, right? So you don't want to go in with such a pre-scripted path that you're not able to branch out into new directions as you learn more. That said, you definitely want to find faculty at a program that you are interested in working with. And keep in mind that most gender and women's studies programs have both people who are sort of fully teaching in the women's and gender studies programs, but also tend to have people all around campus who are their affiliate faculty, people in different departments who also work with women's and gender studies students. And most graduate committees either require or encourage or allow you to have at least one person outside of the department on your committee. So you don't have to limit yourself to just the people who are full-time teaching in the Women's and Gender Studies program. You can also look at their affiliated list of people. And where are you going to find the faculty areas of expertise? All good websites are going to have bios and information about their faculty on their websites. So research that carefully. And then here's another really important piece. What are the requirements for completion? All websites are also going to tell their students or prospective students what the students need to complete in order to graduate with a master's or PhD from that program. Look at them carefully. Do they seem doable to you given your circumstances? And do they seem doable within the time frame that you are willing and able to commit to the program? Now, how many programs should you apply to? I would suggest only a handful. It takes time and money to apply to programs, so don't cast your net really widely, right? I think you can start researching and get a list of a bunch of them, but then narrow down to your top programs. I'd say no more than 4 or 5 is reasonable for cost and time. You should definitely have a top choice or 2, but typically the top choice or 2 are really competitive. And if they are, and by competitive, I mean some programs will only accept 2 or 3 people every semester because they want to fully pay for those students. And so they may not accept a lot of people. And if your programs, your top choices are that competitive, then have some backup plans, right? So maybe you have a couple that would also make you happy but aren't quite as competitive. Grad school applications should be tailored to the program that you apply to, and they cost money, which is why I suggest you only apply to a few. It typically costs money to actually apply to a grad school. It costs money to have your GRE test scores sent to different schools, and I'll talk more about that in the next webinar. And then also, you should not send the same graduate application to every school. You need to tailor the applications, especially the personal statements, to the schools, and that takes time and energy. So applying to 10 schools is probably unreasonable unless you have money to work with and a ton of time on your hands. I also suggest that once you narrow down your list of top choices, that you contact the graduate director at that program. That you make contact with the graduate director and ask them specific questions about their program. Make these authentic questions, right? Questions you actually have, but it can be really helpful to get some direct information about the program, not just from their website, but from their grad director. And here are some things that you might want to think about asking. What is the job placement of the graduates, right? Do they actually get jobs for the people who come out of their program? And by the way, check their website for answers to all of these questions before you ask them. If you go to the grad director and you ask them a question that is answered on their website, that's not going to make you look very good, right? Grad school requires research no matter what field you're going into. And if you can't do simple research like read their website, that is not going to make you look very good. But if these questions are not on their website, then here are some things to ask them. It's also helpful to ask to talk to current grad students or alumni. This can be really helpful because a grad director is a representative of the program, and it's also a faculty member. And so they're going to have one perspective on the program. But current or former students of the program are going to have very different perspectives. And again, remember, you are committing a chunk of your time, resources, energy, and money to a program. And you want to know what your daily lived experience in that program is going to be. The best people to tell you that are other students in that program. And so here are some things to ask grad students. What is the climate like in the program? Is it, did they have a cohort of students that were really bonded and supportive of one another, or was it really cutthroat and competitive and isolating? You might want to know that before you go in. How much support and direct faculty help do the students get? The website's probably not going to tell you that. What is the climate like between grad students? And what is it like to live there geographically? Right? These are kinds of things that other students can tell you. One of the reasons I think it can be helpful to contact the grad director, besides just getting direct answers to something, is that it can also make you as an applicant stand out as an individual. Sometimes grad schools are so competitive that they get so many applications, and on your application, you may just be another name and a packet of information. But once you start directly and personally talking with someone at that program, then you become a sort of an individual with a background, and you've got a personal connection, and that may make your application stand out a little bit more. And in competitive programs, anything can help. Remember that with graduate schools, it is as much about them picking you as it is about you picking them. It needs to be a fit in both directions. And so you doing your work and finding an environment that you really think you can succeed in and flourish in, both on a professional and academic level, but also on a personal level, is really going to be important. Here are some other things to ask. Can you actually work with a faculty who interest you? So when I was applying to my graduate program many years ago, I did some of these things and I said, hey, I want to work with this faculty and that faculty. But when I got there, I found out that those faculty didn't work with graduate students. Now, that ended up working out just fine for me. I found other graduate faculty that were probably actually better fits for me, but that might be something you really want to know, right? Or maybe the faculty that you want to work with is on a grant or on leave or not going to be there when you're there. And again, you might want to know that in advance. Are the courses you are interested in regularly offered? It's possible that there are a list of courses on the university's websites, but that those courses are not regularly offered. And again, something you might want to know before you get there. How many courses can you take outside the program if this matters to you? Sometimes there are limits to that. Do students generally graduate in a timely manner? So if they say on their website that students should complete the program within, 3 years or 5 years, do grad students actually do that, right? At my graduate program, doctoral program, there were some students who took a really long time to graduate, and that's not necessarily just on the student. It can sometimes be sort of the climate of the environment that makes it difficult for students to graduate. And again, you might want to know that in advance. And what kinds of communities are available locally? especially if you plan on settling there for a while, especially if you want a community outside of the university. What's that like? What opportunities are there for you? Are you going to be happy in the community that you are living? Let's talk about money, because money is an issue. These days, so many students are graduating with undergraduate with a ton of loans. So the question really is, do you want to add to that in grad school, and do you have to add to that in grad school? I would say whenever possible, get your grad school paid for. And it can be paid for entirely depending on the program. So many graduate programs offer both graduate assistantships that pay both tuition and some living stipend. So by tuition, that means your books, or maybe not your books, but your courses, whatever a full-time load for students is. When I was in graduate school for both master's and doctorate, my tuition in both programs were paid for. That was part of the package that they offered me, plus a small stipend to live on. And often that stipend comes in the form of graduate assistantships. Graduate assistantships can take the form of research. Maybe you're helping other faculty do their research. Maybe you're teaching, and maybe you're doing other work. If you want to go on to teach at a university, getting a teaching assistantship can be really helpful because you get experience that makes you look good for a job. So in my master's and doctoral programs, I had teaching assistantships through all of it. And so by the time I went on the job market to be a professor, I had years of teaching experience, and not just helping another professor, that is being the person who does their small group facilitation and their grading. I did that for a year, but then I also had years of teaching my own courses. So that means being fully responsible for designing the syllabus, teaching, every class, grading, mentoring students, all that kind of stuff. And so by the time I went on the market for a professor job, I had, numerous syllabi, experience teaching all the core women's studies courses, as well as several literature and English and pop culture courses. And that really gave me experience that helped me on the job market. Now, graduate assistantships may be more likely in some departments than in others. So for instance, many English departments at the graduate level offer a lot of teaching assistantships because they do teach a lot of the writing courses at universities. And so they may be more able to offer assistantships than some other fields. But other fields might offer research assistantships or other types of assistantships across campus. So really look into whether you can get funding, partial or complete funding for graduate school. And most of the program websites will tell you about their offerings. Some graduate programs, as I mentioned, are really competitive because they don't want to bring people in they can't pay for. So other programs offer a limited number of assistantships, but also offer other entries to other grad students, but then those grad students have to pay for it themselves. And then the question becomes, do you want to take on more debt? This might be a reason if you're going into a field where they don't really offer a lot of assistantships. This might be a reason to go into the workforce for a while. If it's common in your type of field for places of employment to pay for their employees to go back to school and get master's degrees. Sometimes employers will help fund some of that. Now, of course, if you do it that way, typically you have to do your grad school on top of working full-time. And so it might take you longer, but then your employer might pay for it. So these are some of the things to really consider. And so that's part one of this tips on how to apply for graduate school. Stay tuned for part two, where I'll tell you a little bit more about how to apply, how to prepare your application packet, things like writing sample and personal statements, and timing for applying. Good luck.